I've got great pleasure in introducing our next two speakers. I don't really think they need too much of an introduction. I've got Kevin Lamb and Derek Lee, both from the Microsoft team. Kevin has been with Microsoft since 1997 and is a principal program manager. Derek has been with Microsoft since 2014 as a program manager. They're going to be speaking about an introduction to Logic Apps. Guys, over to you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Touche, John. Now it's your turn to eat up in my time. So that's an old joke that we have. So it's great to be here again in London to talk about Logic Apps. You know, this is a session about the introduction to Logic Apps, but it's really about how to make you guys the integration heroes. So I went to look up integration hero in the dictionary, and it wasn't there. But I did take the hero definition from the dictionary and tweaked it a little bit and see if this sounds familiar to any of you. In IT, a person of superhuman qualities and often semi-divine origin, in particular one of those whose exploits and dealings with the ancient on-prem systems were in the subject of myths and legends. Does that represent any of you guys out there? Yeah, some of you guys, right? So you saw some of those gymnastics with the host integration server in DB2 and SAP systems, and trying to understand that, bring that together, and understand messaging. That was the the integration heroes back in the day. In the States, it just means a mixed meat of submarine sandwiches, but we won't talk about that. That's okay. So what is Logic Apps? How many people have used Logic Apps? Oh, a bunch of you. Awesome. So I don't really need to introduce it to at least half of you, if not more. But for those that have not used it, I want to make sure everybody's level set and understands what Logic Apps is. So Logic Apps is Azure's workflow as a service. It is the integration tissue across the services that you use in the cloud and on-premises. Those cloud services are SaaS providers, including Office, Dynamics. You can talk to Box and Twitter and whatever services up there in the cloud, to on-premises systems. And you saw examples of SAP and DB2 and SQL Server on-prem and Oracle database and a dozen other types of connectors on-prem. So with Logic Apps being that connective tissue, providing you a workflow in the cloud so that you can then automate those processes that then bring the power of Azure as part of your integration platform. Right? Logic Apps is the heart of the iPaaS offering, and recently we were announced as one of the leaders in the iPaaS quadrant. And it's because we have these capabilities of being able to easily integrate these services and take the power of Azure to bring it at hand. And with that, you also get the power of Azure's artificial intelligence. So you can bring machine learning, cognitive services into your business processes. Right? Being able to take the data that's already going through your integration pipes and then being able to enhance that data with intelligence really makes you the integration hero. We saw with the example of Confused.com that companies want to get to market faster, right? It's not about writing more code. It's about how do I get my product out to market faster than my competitors or new things that are coming up that may disrupt our businesses. And Logic Apps, with its innovative and smart designer, allows you to go through those loopholes of trying to figure out how to connect these disparate systems. So we've created canonical models of trying to integrate these different systems from something as distinct as Salesforce.com connecting to your SAP system. How do you get those things to talk to each other? Right? So with our innovative designer, you're able to quickly and intuitively be able to build these and have them to put together. So each connector will provide a set of tokens, and those tokens can be mapped to different parameters since everything we talk to is some type of API. And because we're at the heart of iPaaS, you can build your enterprise applications right on top of Logic Apps. Right? You saw that again with Confused.com. It's the heart of their business that's running all that in the background and being able to connect those in a reliable fashion. So Logic Apps has out of the box over 200 connectors. There were a couple of new connectors that we talked about that were coming out today. But those connectors connect to social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, to your CRM systems like Salesforce, or to mail systems, Office and Google. right? So we have hundreds of these connectors that are able to connect to those services, our first-party services, Office, Dynamics, SharePoint, Visual Studio. So all that is available to you as connectors and being able to really easily integrate those services, right? With that, we also have on-prem connectors. On-prem connectors use our on-premises data gateway to be able to give you that same look and feel for all the connectivity that you have that's up in the cloud. The connectors create the abstraction across the different APIs and services and protocols that you can speak to. But really what is the resource is what's called an API connection. That API connection creates the abstraction of the configuration and auth for each of those. And then those API connections, which are Azure resources, can get deployed alongside or separately from your Logic Apps, can then be reused across your set of Logic Apps, right? So then you can keep your configuration and your authentication distinct from the business process that you're actually building. Finally, if we don't have the connector that you want, or you have your own custom service, you're able to build your own custom connector. So then you can have the same experience with both using the API connection experience so that your secrets are distinct from your programming model, as well as being able to connect to services like REST and SOAP. Right? So if you have your own custom web service that's either on-prem or in the cloud, you get to build your own custom connector to do that. Or if one of the connectors we built, you don't like it, everybody has their opinion, you can go build your own. Right? We use the same technology to go build these connectors, and then we've made it available to you with the custom connector experience. So Logic Apps really provides this great platform versatility. Right? So what are types of things that are people doing with it? So we have connectors for different messaging systems. So for Service Bus, you get to do queues and topics for asynchronous messaging and pub sub. We have Event Grid being able to do event-based processing across Azure and custom topics. We have event hubs and IoT so that as information's coming off of devices, right? You saw the demo with the Raspberry Pi. As that information is coming in off of the cloud, you get to consume all that through our messaging platform. Data wrangling. Because we have these connectors to various systems, to different database types of resources like SQL DB, Oracle DB, MySQL, Teradata. We have all these different types of connectors to various databases and data sources, even the cloud-based ones like Cosmos DB or TableStore, if you want to think of it as for your data stores, to entity-based systems, if you want to think of Dynamic CRM or your Salesforce system. And how do you take all that data that's in these disparate systems and wrangle them together to make something that's even more powerful or really get a single view of the world? So being able to synchronize that data across these distinct entities is really easy in Logic Apps. B2B and EDI, so trading partner management. So we saw some of that today when you're doing Edifact or X12 processing over an AS2 protocol, being able to have the rich set of connectors that makes that super easy to take flat file parsing as you're going into an SAP system, for example, and you want to trade with your partner. All that's built into the platform today. More classic hybrid enterprise application integration. So as you're thinking about different message formats, I have an XML message that has to be transformed into an IDOC or to another XML system, a system that needs a different format of that schema. So we have the ability to do rich mapping between these different systems and being able to do that communication either through direct messaging or through queues. Process automation. So everybody has stuff they do all the time, right? They have daily workloads and weekly workloads, or as things get built up into their backend system, they need to clean things up. And so Logic Apps is a really great way to schedule workloads that are happening in the background to go, clean up your database. We use it internally to create weekly reports about what was checked in to GitHub that's about to be released to market. So then we get reports that are built out that scans your GitHub to go ahead, build those reports, and send out emails. If you want to clean up somebody created a blog about, hey, how do I clean up all of my Azure deployments? There's a limit of 800 Azure deployments that you could have. And so as you're doing CI/CD, those things can build up, and somebody has to go in and write some script to go clean that up, which could have taken think 6 days if they had to clean up 800 different deployments, and instead in Logic Apps just took about an hour to process in the background because it's so highly parallelized, and then can run every day for you. And then finally, Smart SaaS. So how do you add intelligence to your integrations? With the cognitive services like text analytics, video image processing, we saw in the demo earlier today, face recognition, being able to bring that power to your integrations into your business. Adding intelligence is one of the game changers we have for being able to do bots and doing Lewis, right? So language understanding as you do your business processes, and bring that power to your integration. And finally, all of that's built on a serverless platform. So you don't have to worry about the scalability of your service. We handle all the events and then scale out those Logic Apps for you. You don't have to worry about DevOps and management and doing OS patching, right? There are no machines, there are no servers. Yeah. And then finally, microbilling. You only pay for what you use, right? So if your system's either quiesced, you don't need to do anything, or it's not one of your peak loads, you don't have to worry about how do I size my system. And during those holidays, you don't have to plan for the holiday and say, oh, I have to deploy more servers because it's going to be Black Friday in the next couple of weeks, and I have to think about that. No, we handle all that for you, and you only pay for what you consume, so you're not paying that maximum cost of the peak load that you expect to have, right? Only what you consume. How do we do that? So the first thing that you need to do is you need a trigger. That trigger is what listens for events in your Logic app and creates a new instance of your Logic app. Right, the first type is the recurrence or advanced scheduling trigger. And this is, as we talked about the automated processes, you get to have a timer that's actually working in the background to go ahead and create a new instance of a Logic app. Right, that timer can run every 5 minutes, every hour, every 3 days. Or you can do an advanced schedule, so the first and last Monday of every month at 8 and 12 p.m. Right, so we can do that for you. People don't realize that Logic Apps has that rich scheduling capability to do all this automated processing for you in the background. The next one is polling. So a lot of APIs today don't have a callback mechanism to let you know that there's new data. So you have an older API or just one that's not built in that way. So we provide the polling capabilities so we can ask that service, is there new data that needs to be processed? So we have that polling built in. You don't have to worry about asking that system when there's new data. If your system supports the webhook protocol, then we have a trigger that will subscribe to that system and give it our endpoint, which will then provide a callback for that system to call us back when there is new data. So if it does support webhooks, then we can provide that. We'll sit there and wait, and then once it calls us back, then we'll trigger a new instance based on that callback. And finally, the request trigger. The request trigger is essentially creates an API for your Logic app, so then you can call it from anywhere. You can call it from Postman or a website, or pass it in as an endpoint to your application, or as a backend to your API management, so then you can call it through API management and instantiate a new instance of a Logic app with each call. Action. So we wouldn't be a workflow engine if we didn't have a set of control actions. Right? So first is a scope, which allows you to encapsulate a collection of actions. That scope we'll talk about later tomorrow, different ways that you can utilize that for more advanced patterns and scenarios. Conditions, so if, else, you want to be able to have conditional paths in your Logic app. Case statements, so you can go through a number of different values on a particular property to determine which you want to do. For each allows you to take an array or a collection and then iterate across each of those items in that collection. And for each provides you a highly scalable, parallelized set of a way to work through that collection of data. And then finally, do until. We give you that ability to go ahead and do work until some condition is true. So if you want to talk to a backend system and find out until you get a particular value back, keep talking to that system, or some other pattern for being able to do work until you find that condition to be true. And then finally, at the heart, right, is a set of actions that you actually want to call. Right? The first one is is being able to call APIs, these connectors that provide that abstraction to these services up in the cloud. So if you want to talk to your Salesforce system or your BizTalk server or your queue, we have connectors that are able to do that and abstract that for you. It can invoke code. So we don't host your code, but we have lots of different ways to actually have your code hosted. Our first way is being able to call an Azure function or other serverless offering that allows you to have small snippets of code that can be quickly called. We can run a container. So we have an ACI connector so that you can go ahead and run code in a container if it needs to do a lot of processing. If you need to do ML processing in the background or video processing, you call a container and then let it do its work. Logic Apps will wait until that work is done and continue. If it's 10 minutes, an hour, or a day later, it will wait and continue. Of course, we have the ability to host code. It's in web apps, so then you can have your API app or web app that's sitting there, and we can call it. It sits somewhere between your an API call and hosting your code, but you can call that directly natively from Logic Apps. There's control behavior, so you can terminate a Logic app. You can have custom retry policies on each of the actions. Every action that we have has a default retry policy so that we do the work for you, so that in case there's a blip in the system, you don't have to worry about how to handle that. We take care of that right out of the box. Message handling. I talked earlier about the ability to construct new messages or transform an XML using an XML map from one form to the other, do message validation, right? Format validation, schema validation. And then finally, expressions and operators. So we have a bunch of built-in functions that are built into the DSL that allow you to do things like get a GUID or do string manipulation or find if something is null or do some work. So we have about 50 or so different functions. So before you have to go write code, go look at those built-in expressions that we have to go ahead and handle that for you in line so you don't have to go out and write your own code. Okay. So let's get to the demo.
So one thing that we're really proud of here within the Logic App team is how easy it is for you to get started with Logic App. And within a few minutes, with a few clicks of a button, you can have your first integration solution ready. And then you can see the benefit of using Logic App. If you think about it, when integrating with different systems and services, you spend most of your time understanding how to talk to their APIs. Because every APIs are ever so slightly different. How you authenticate, how you provide the payloads, how you specify versions. Logic App take care of that. Logic App do the hard work of figuring out how to move data from one place to the other, so you can focus on what data you want to move and where you want to move it to. So let's get started and see how within 5 minutes we can go from Hello World to an integration hero using Logic Apps. So I'm simply going to switch back into the Azure portal. I have an empty Logic App already created. So in this one, we're going to implement a Logic App that follows request and response pattern. The Logic App is going to expose itself as a REST API, and when called upon, it's just going to return Hello World to the caller. This is one of the very common scenarios that people use Logic App for, and we're doing exactly that. So in the Visual Designer, I'm starting with a trigger. This is just a request trigger. And then I'm going to follow with a response action. In the response action, I'm simply going to return Hello World in the body. I'm going to save the Logic App. And the moment I save it, a URL is generated. So this is the new REST endpoint that my Logic App exposes itself with. What I can do is I can switch to Postman and make a request to it. So here's the URI. I'm going to click send, and boom, Hello World is returned. It's really as simple as that. Within a few clicks of a button, I have a REST API that will return me some content. So that was cool, but let's keep adding to it. What I'm going to tell the request trigger now is what a sample input may look like. Here I'm going to say it's going to be a JSON payload with a property called zip code. I'm going to give an example. So it's going to look like something like that. So you see, I don't even have to know the JSON schema, but by just simply telling Logic App a sample of my JSON payload, the schema is generated. Now with the schema, what I can do is I can, instead of return a static content, I can return and consume that input. So I can say the zip code you provided was zip code. So you see here in the pop-up, what we show you, we call dynamic content or tokens, is a set of tokens that you can use to reference output from a previous action or trigger in this case. So I'm going to select zip code. I'm going to save my Logic app. Here I'm going to switch back to Postman. And I'm going to change this a little bit. Let's use a different zip code. So I'm going to click Send. And we should see the zip code I provided is returned to me. So again, with a few clicks of a button, my Logic app is now consuming the input in the trigger and returning that to the caller. But let's do something else. I'm going to go between the request and response action, and I'm going to insert a new action here. So for this example, let's use, not response again. We're going to use MS Embedder. So MS Embedder is an out-of-box connector that will provide you for you to be able to query the current weather or a forecast given a particular location. So it's really as simple as searching for the keyword that I want to add. Here I have MS Embedder. I'm going to select Get Forecast for today. Zip code, I can use that as the input, and then I can return that to the caller. So let's say something like the weather for location is day summary with a high of, we're going to choose the temperature high and a low of temperature low. Let's keep adding to it. Let's say the chance of rain is, I think there is another token that I can use to reference the likelihood of it raining. All right, so let me save the Logic app and switch back to Postman. So this zip code belongs to Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I went to college. I think it's not going to rain, so it will be a high wow of 107 Fahrenheit and a low of 78. That's very hot, and the chance of rain is 0. Let's change the zip code, and let's use Redmond, Washington, so the headquarters of Microsoft. Looks like it's going to rain. No surprise here. This is the first demo, really, and I hope your takeaway is within 5 minutes, with a few clicks of a button, I didn't write a single line of code, but I'm able to consume MS Embedder API without having to read a single document describing how to work with that particular API. I'm able to use the Logic App Visual Designer to consume a particular API called Get Forecast for today. I can transform the data to however the format that I want and return that to the caller. Right? If you think about in the context of Contoso Retail, we can have that data in the email that we send to our customers saying, whenever you come and pick up your order, remember to bring an umbrella because it's likely going to rain. So hopefully that shows you how easy it is to go from Hello World into Integration Hero in 5 minutes. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Derek. Excellent. Love it when demos work. So what else can it do? So I'm going to quickly go through this because we have to catch up in our time, but Logic apps are manageable. So in the earlier demo, you saw how we have a trigger and run history, so you can see every time that the trigger fires, we get a historical event for that and the runs. And so when you click on that run, then you get to see a monitoring view of what that Logic app actually looked like and all the inputs and outputs for every step that occurred. Super powerful to being able to get insights into your Logic app and see what's happening behind the scenes. You have version history and rollback, so every time you save a Logic app, we actually save that version of that Logic app. One, we need it because you may have old Logic apps still running in the background, so it has to still run on that old version, but new instances will run on that new version. But you get to roll back to a previous version that you had saved. Diagnostics and alerts, so we can take the power of Azure and provide alerts in case something's been going wrong. For example, if my Logic Apps has been failing for the last 5 minutes, send me an email, send me an alert, right? You can have, in the new Azure monitoring, you get to have these set of group events that you can even call another Logic app, which then can interrogate your guys who are on call and then send the message via SMS or email or Teams or Slack or whatever way that those guys communicate with, and all abstracted for you and being able to do that operations management itself. And finally, Operations Management Suite. So we have solution packs built into Operations Management Suite so that, in our monitoring view, you get to look at a single Logic app, and then in Operations Management Suite, you actually get to look across your collection of Logic apps. So the application that you have likely has more than one Logic app. So then you can see the correlation between those and other services in Azure with OMS. Okay, so the same experience that you saw Derek just build in the portal, we have that in Visual Studio. So for those developer-centric folks who are doing production systems, get to stay in Visual Studio. So we are integrated as part of the Resource Group project, and what it does is actually it's working off of the ARM template. So the Resource Group project recognizes that your ARM template has a Logic app in it, right? Because our definition is serialized into that ARM template, and then we'll go ahead and render the designer right in Visual Studio, and then you have that same developer experience right in Visual Studio. You get to deploy and save it to source control, and since it's in source control with VSTS, then you can do CI/CD with your Logic apps. We're also exposed in the Cloud Explorer in Visual Studio, so then you can go find your published Logic apps up in the cloud. So then you can manage your Logic apps where you can delete or enable, disable those Logic apps and see runs that have happened right within Visual Studio. So I still don't have to go to the portal to see what those runs look like. That same monitoring experience is available there as well. A common pattern is that somebody would go write their Logic app up in the portal and realize, okay, I really want to kind of bring my DevOps experience to this. Go find it in Cloud Explorer, and then you can download that Logic app and then have it exported as an ARM template and then imported as your project in Visual Studio. The integration account. So we saw earlier today how we integrated with SAP and doing trading partner management using the integration account. So we have the ability to support Edifact and X12 over the AS2 protocol, manage partners and agreements with Logic apps, and it's the same, we have tools that I think we'll talk about later in the conference to be able to export your trading partners from BizTalk and import them directly into Logic apps very easily. With that, we also have the ability to do XML and flat file handling, so we store your schemas and your maps in the integration accounts, so then you can have a rich set of those to choose from as you build your Logic app, as well as bring the power of liquid transformation as well, so that you can actually do transformations across different types, including JSON, XML, and just strings. And finally, we add the ability to do business tracking into the integration account, so you can add your own tracking data as part of the tracking data that's going to OMS and enhance that data as well. Logic Apps is secure. So we're built in Azure as an ARM resource, so then we have a role-based access security, so then you can have the distinction between operators versus developers. We do auditing, so every change that happens in your Logic app is audited, so you know who's made a change to your Logic app, so you can do that for production. We have static IPs, so if you need to have network rules, you can go ahead and trust the set of IPs that we give you to set up those network rules. IP constraints allow you to lock down we saw that request trigger, and yes, it's secure with a key, but you can even lock it down more with IP constraints. So you can take that IP constraint, for example, and only say API management can call this Logic app, and then it's locked down, so then you can do your rich auth and API management, and then call into your Logic app or whatever system that is. You can regenerate those access keys, so if you have policies that require you to regenerate them at a particular pace or they get compromised, you can go regenerate them, and everything we have is encrypted at rest.
So we have seen how Logic App takes you from Hello World to being an integration hero. So now let's see how Logic App can give you superpower capabilities. And we're going to go through a scenario where we take an order in an image format, a JPEG image in this particular case, do some image recognition, and have a custom approval experience. Again, I'm going to just switch back into the portal. This time I will start with a blob storage resource. Matt earlier in the talk showed you integration between Logic App and Service Bus via Event Grid. The other integration that we have recently enabled you to do is between storage account and Logic App. And in this particular case, we even have a few different templates to help you get started. What I'm going to choose is this when a new image is uploaded template. It basically recognizes whenever a new image is uploaded to blob storage, run it through OCR, and then upload it to SharePoint. We're going to use it as our starting canvas. Already have all the connections here. It will take a few seconds for us to establish that. So one thing I'm going to do, again, just like we mentioned, we're constantly making improvement to Logic Apps. So the most recent improvement is we allowed you to specify the particular event type that you care about when subscribed to a particular event grid event. So here I'm saying when a blob storage is created. And with that, I can even get rid of the condition that I currently have in the template. And the template is going to be updated soon to reflect that change. So I'm just going to move really quick all the actions out of the condition. I'm going to get rid of the condition because I don't need it anymore now with the improvement in the trigger. And I'm actually going to remove the SharePoint action as well because we won't be uploading the file into SharePoint. So what we have here is really simple. We're triggering off a new image being uploaded to blob storage. We retrieve the URI so we can reference the image. We send it to OCR connector to do text recognition. I'm going to save this really quick, and let's just make sure that it works. So now a Logic App has been deployed. I'm going to switch into my blob storage. I'm just going to upload a file using the web interface. I'm going to go into this particular container that I've already created. Let's upload something. All right, let's keep going. So I think I have an order already created. Let me try to locate that. I think it's this one. It's just a book that I bought off Amazon. You see, it's a JPEG image. I'm just going to upload that. And by the time I switch back to the Logic App that I created, hopefully a run is already triggered. I think we called new Logic App something like new Logic App. Right, so we have a run already. Let's see what happens. So this is the run or monitoring view in which you can review all the runs that have been triggered. So you can see the text is being recognized from the JPEG image that I have uploaded. That's really cool. Now let's start adding stuff to that template and make it fit our scenario. The next thing I'm going to do is call into an Azure function. Now, the text being recognized is cool, but I can't really be consuming that. I want to extract the order total amount from that blob of text. An Azure function is great for that. If you think about it, this is actually a great example of showing how Logic App and the function can work together. Use Logic App for workflow and orchestration, and use Azure function for complex data manipulation. I already have a function created, and I'm simply passing in the detected text. The function will run some complex regex logic and return me the order total. Now what I can do is then I can add a condition. I can say, if the total amount is greater than $10, I'm going to do something. So in the if true branch, I'm going to use the approval action. Outlook approval action is another very popular action that people use and make it really easy for implement sending an email, waiting for the user to take an action within that email, and then proceed from there and see what the user selected and execute different business logic. So I'm going to just send it to me, and for the subject, let's just say order needs approval. All right, I'm going to save that, and for the time's sake, I'm just going to resubmit the trigger, and when I resubmit the trigger, it's going to use the same image over and over again, so we don't have to go to blob storage and do that. So I'm going to sign into my email, and hopefully, we should have an email ready for us to view. There we go. So this is the email I got. It's really simple. The options that I specified in Logic App Designer, approve and reject, are actually surfaced as a first-class experience for me to choose. I can simply click approve, and if I go back to the run, you will see that my response is captured here. So what I can do from there on is to add another condition block and say if the order is approved, I may want to transfer that into another blob storage or service bus queue. If the order is rejected because it contains some high-risk factor, I can then escalate that and have a second tier of review. So that concludes the demo, and hopefully you will see how Logic App empowers you to do more complex scenarios, again, with just a few clicks of a button without you having to write a single line of code.
Excellent. Thank you, Derek. So it really shows you the power that Logic Apps has from being able to do OCR image processing. How many of you have bought an OCR image processing system and spent millions of dollars on that? I knew some of you will be out there. To doing it with, fractions of a penny. I'm sorry. So, we can do intelligence. We can do long-running workflow processes all in Logic Apps and with a few clicks. And in only a few minutes, he's able to show you that very simple scenario. And you can continue building on that, to meet the business process that you need. So here's the juicy stuff. What's coming? This is what everybody's waiting for, right? OK. A couple of things. China Cloud. So for those of you who are multinational companies who need to work both in here in Europe or in one country as well as in China, right? There are different government rules about running your workloads in China. We are currently deploying our Logic Apps to China Cloud, so then you can run your Logic Apps in China Cloud. Smart Designer. So our designer's already pretty smart, nifty, right? But we want to make it smarter. So we're actually going to add artificial intelligence into the designer. We're actually working on that right now so that we can do better predictive management of the connector or operation that you want to call next. We'll add favorites to it. And so what we've made fast, we're going to even make faster for your development process. Dedicated and connected, right? This is our code word for the integration service environment that you saw at the keynote. So we'll have a whole session, or at least half of a session, talking about the integration service environment, but that's the ability to talk to VNets and having a dedicated stamp for your Logic Apps workload. Testability, so the ability to mock inputs and outputs, being able to have custom triggers that you can actually put in the input yourself. That's being worked on right now. Being able to call an action just so you can see what an expression looks like are all coming as well. On-prem, so we're pushing ourselves towards the edge. And we're going to show that initially with Azure Stack, which is Azure's offering for being able to run your cloud on-prem. Managed service identity. Very cool stuff. So, today, as you go in through these connectors, you have to provide a particular identity. Usually, it's your user identity. You can do other service identities. But now, with managed service identities, you can give your Logic App an identity, and then you can, especially as you're doing back-end processing, you don't want to use personal identities. You want to use the identity of the system that you're talking to. So with MSIs, Logic Apps can now have its own identity, and then you can give permission to that Logic App to access one of your systems. OAuth request trigger. So our request trigger takes a SAS key, and we are working on the ability for it to take a bearer token, so then you can do OAuth on that request endpoint as well. Output property obfuscation. That's important because sometimes you want to have data that comes into the monitoring view. Everything gets exposed as for great purposes, so you can have insights as to what's going on. But sometimes there's sensitive data that goes through that through your Logic App, and you want to not have your operators look at that or anybody look at that. In cases of healthcare or finance, you want to be able to kind of blackline those things out. So we're going to add the ability to have property obfuscation so that you can mark those properties as not being exposed in that way. They stay encrypted on the store and then don't get shown in those monitoring views. Then once we have that, then we can have Key Vault support, right? Key Vault manages your secrets. And so one of the blocking capabilities for supporting Key Vault so that you can then pass secrets around was this obfuscation of the properties. So then that will follow soon after. So then you can use Key Vault to pass it to, for example, our most popular connector is our HTTP connector, right? So you're doing raw HTTP calls, and you want to hide those secrets in your designer as well. Is that enough? No? Okay, it is enough. So everybody always wants more. You guys are so greedy. Well, so that's the intro to Logic Apps. Hopefully everybody feels like they can be empowered to build intelligent, powerful integrations so that you guys can be the superheroes at your companies. Okay, thank you.